The Brisbane Lions Fancast wouldn't be possible without our 2024 sponsors, Hop On Brewery Tours and Crisp Communications. Hop On Brewery Tours give you the chance to learn and experience some of the best craft breweries across Brisbane and the Gold Coast. Check them out and book yourself a tour right now at hoponbrewerytours.com.au. And Abby and the team at Crisp Communications, not only are they going to get you some Brisbane Lions Fancast stickers, but they can help you out. If you're in business and you need a marketing push, you need help with your digital marketing, your very own podcast, whether it's stickers for your own business, they offer it all. Web design, podcast management, social media, training and coaching, it's all available at crispcoms.co. Make sure you check out Abby and the team because they will get you everything you need to get your business skyrocketing. All right, let's get into the show.
And it's the Brisbane Lions who beat the Magpies in the 2023 AFL Grand Final. Mackay! He's done it!
What the hell is that?
From long range, lets it launch, coming back! Oh, Freddie flushed it!
Oh no! We suck again!
Here we are, relief for Collingwood.
Everything's turned from gold into shit.
As the old saying goes, what happens in Vegas gets uploaded to the cloud and derails your season and renders you useless at the Gabba. That's right, the Brisbane Lions Fancast is back for another week, and Pat is fired up if the off-air chat is anything to go by. Where to begin with what is going on with our football team, mate? 0-3, 0 from 2 at the Gabba. Some pretty tough assignments on the way as well, including away games against Melbourne and GWS, with a home game in amongst Geelong and Gatherand all thrown in there as well. Hugh McCluggage hasn't signed a contract extension yet. People calling for the coach's head. It's all just going really well, isn't it? As he takes a ominous sip of his hot beverage to wind up.
Where to begin? Do we start in Brisbane? Do we start in Melbourne? Do we start in Nashville? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the footy before we head anywhere else. A lot of changes swung, not as many as we foretold in our last episode of the podcast, and a large portion of that was due to the fact that at the 11th hour, Tom Doedee has partially torn the same ACL he spent the last 10 months recovering from. Gets through a VFL game unscathed, gets through main training with 60 seconds to go, does the tear, he's out, even though he was right on the cusp of being named. So that really threw a spanner in the works. Not only that, Kai Lohmann and Darcy Gardner were fine and took their respective places in the AFL and VFL teams. So it's I don't even know. 0-2 at the Gabba is probably the worst feeling, though.
Not for me.
Not for you? Okay, well, yeah, as we'll get into later in the show. Pat's fired up about all sorts of gear going on. But what did we change? I mean, obviously, Jared Lyons went out, Lachie Neale came in. That was a bit of a lay-down misère at that point.
I think, that obviously helped our midfield, and our midfield was a lot better than it's been. I would argue quite heavily. We had Darcy Fort come in. We had Jack Payne come in. Lohmann retained his spot as the sub, and it was Gardner and Connor McKenna.
Yeah, so the Darcy Fort was probably the weirdest choice in terms of selection. I don't think anybody really saw that one coming. Jack Payne came straight back into the team and kicked off where he left off with another pretty poor performance.
It was kind of like non-noticeable in terms of how kind of bad or good it was. It's a really hard game to quantify in terms of like, there were some individual performances I don't think really made for much mention. Like, some of the team were good, some of the team were pretty great, and other elements were pretty awful. Some were great in some ways and absolutely terrible in other ways, and we'll talk about that because I know that we will disagree on certain things. But it lined up sort of in a more sort of traditional two ruck, and you mentioned that on the Discord. You said, look, they've got two recognised ruckmen, that we kind of went toe-to-toe with it because in the time, there have been games where we struggled against Big Mace, and the two of them together, I think, could have done a bit of a number on them. we started reasonably bright, and then we kind of just coughed up a few goals, and it sort of set a bit of a tone for the game. Second quarter was an anomaly, and that seems to be a repeating thing with having, one good, controlled or dominant quarter, and they just tended to break the game open. But there are a lot of mitigating circumstances, I feel, for that. But yeah, take us through the first quarter, Brooksy.
Yeah, well, what I wanted to happen happened, and that is Jared Berry didn't float down to the back line after the huddle. He went straight to a wing and had a roll on Josh Dacos, and Dunkley went straight to DeGoey. So I was pretty happy with those little matchups, and Dane Zorko went behind the ball. So pretty happy with how that all started. And to be fair, when Collingwood sort of went in at quarter time 5-1, I wasn't unhappy with that either, because the last couple of weeks we started off well and we know how that ended. So I was like, you know what? Whatever. Let's give them a head start and see if we can and peg it back. And to be fair, we did until halftime, and we actually went in with a bit of a lead, a very slender lead, but a lead all the same at halftime. And, things were feeling good at halftime, but yeah, then Collingwood settled and just went on from there.
There was an element at halftime where if our talls could take a mark inside forward 50, they seemed almost immune to it. Danaher took 2 on just outside the arc of the 50, and it's like, okay, so there's some weird shit going on inside 50 here. A lot of double grabbers, a lot of weird ones.
So strange. Like, they both got it. Both Hipwood and Danaher got 2 hands to the ball so much and just could not pull it in. And it, like, bouncing off chests. It's very, very, very strange.
Yeah, there's a part of me that, I get frustrated with certain free kicks in the marking contest, but there are elements where, so if you get front on contact and it's you haven't marked the ball or it's a single grabber, it goes. But if you're double grabbing and people are chopping your arms and stuff, it's all good. But whatever, there's bigger fish to fry when it comes to the umpiries. But yeah, it just felt like if one of them could kind of grab the game by the nuts, it would have been fine. And they just didn't.
Yeah.
And Collingwood sort of came back into the game massive. Like that second quarter was, aside from conversion inside 50, was pretty near on perfect. Collingwood entirely scoreless. Bobby Hill got off the chain in the first quarter a little bit, and I think because I said that I wanted Ainsworth to play on him.
And he did?
He did, and it was 3 goals. The first goal, he wasn't on him. Zorko was tracking back. Second goal, fair enough, Bobby Hill, but it was a tackle on Fort, and I think it was directly after that Darcy Cameron got tackled and missed the ball with his shoe and in the goal square, and we didn't get one. So it's like, what the fuck? And then the third one where I'm like, okay, so you've wrestled in the goal square, one of them's ended up on the floor, and there's inconspicuous by its omission any replay of that incident.
Yeah.
So aside from that, I think Ainsworth probably did a pretty good job, because you're not a Norm Smith medalist for no reason, and Bobby Hill really did grab the final series last year by the horns. So I got what I wanted, and I didn't think it traded too badly, all things considered, particularly with some kind of BS going on in there. Yeah, second quarter is close to perfect as you can get without hitting the scoreboard, and a lot of that's kind of due to our kind of 3 main forwards not really doing a great deal at this point in time. So I know there was probably one moment that gave you cause for concern, which was big Jared Berry lining up to take a kick out.
Yeah, that was obviously a bit of a concern, especially when Darcy Wilmot was in the area. But, I mean, nothing terrible happened from it, so whatever. I don't know. There's a few things you could point to as...
I would assume he hit a target, given he only missed 2 targets the whole game. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's still amazing how you can, for him... I thought he was in our best 5 players on the field. He had 20 disposals, 3rd highest meters game, 2nd highest tackles, and went at 90% efficiency, which was a hell of a lot more than any of the other players that had more than 20 touches. So, and he looked like he was line breaking and he was running away. A couple of free kicks, and people will focus on the one where he got spun around or the high shot he did, and good on him. But I thought it was definitely a good game. And if he had that game every week, no one would complain, yet people are complaining about it anyway. So, feel bad because there's really not a lot that he can do about it. If he has a good game, it's like, oh, don't care. Or if he has a shit game, it's throw him into row Z. So, not Connor row Z, actual row Z.
Yeah, it is. I mean, case in point, Josh Dunkley, 26 touches, but is that the quietest 26 touch game you've ever seen?
Uh, I don't know.
But
it was.
Having
Yeah.
said that,
Uh,
Jordan De Goey didn't exactly break the game open as well, so you probably take your wins there.
Yeah, and I think probably Jared Berry had the better of Josh Dacos. So, you take your small victories where you can across the field. Lockie Neal was pretty good.
It was very good.
Really tried to take the game on and try to do as much as he could. Kicked a really nice goal in the first quarter. Second quarter? First quarter? Second quarter.
Yeah, probably the first half along the way. Yeah, nice little set shot
Yeah.
from him. I mean, he had an all-time game. Oh, it was a classic Lockie Neal game. 10 clearances, 35 touches. A lot of those contested. Hit the scoreboard. I mean, that's what you sort of expect from Lockie, with the added bonus of hitting the scoreboard as well. Zorko played well, and McCluggage was really good as well across the game. Solid contributors like Link was good as well. Darcy Wilmot has put together a fairly good first 3 games without really being amazing. Leicester's been pretty solid the first couple of weeks as well, but there's a lot of players that are well down on form from 2023. A lot.
Yeah, I was just checking there how much time on the field Lockie Neal spent. It was 89, 90%. So you were calling for one of those Richmond elimination final styles games, and you got it. Now here's the point where we will disagree. And I sent you a message during the game saying that Zorko behind the ball is not sustainable, and I am going to stick with that.
Yeah. No, I understand
Yeah.
that for sure.
And it's for a couple of different reasons. I think that his fitness, and I don't know that he has the ability to go the whole season. So if it's something that is relied upon,
Yep.
He could fall short. He could do a hamstring. He could do a calf, whatever. The other element is that he cost us directly at least 4 goals due to turnover or effort or errors. And I get you want the ball to be moving forward and you want some drive, but is it worth it? Probably not. It's not for me.
I just don't like what.
I saw.
What's our other answer?
Not to play that way. If you play slow, you're not going to get 4 goals kicked on you. But you to have that level of chaos, you're requiring him to be directly responsible for 5 goals in order to make up for it and give you more. And I just don't think that he's able to do that. It's frustrating because, when he does things well, they're good and they get the team moving. But I think that a kind of different approach is probably the way to go. And is it the sort of thing where we go, well, we might only score 70 or 80 points, but we want to be more solid. And I think knowing kind of where your strength is within the team, it's like we don't have someone to be Kitty Coleman and we don't have someone to be McKenna right at the moment. So we shouldn't try and shoehorn people into it. And I agree. And I agree with what you said. And I agree. And I wrote it. I said, he's the most similar in terms of Coleman, in terms of his kicking, but I was worried about his defensive accountability. And if it's going to be this every week, I would not.
Well, we've got still a couple more weeks without McKenna. So, maybe it's a case of, sticking a Jackson Pryor in there who had another okay game in the twos. It's just we do need some sort of drive off halfback because our game style relies on it. So we do need something. And Wilmot by himself is not the answer. And Answorth's disposal has always been questionable.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it's sort of you're running out of ideas, but it could have been more than 4 goals. And I mean, I saw people say that they thought Zorko had an absolute blinder, and I'm like, yeah, in one sense, he's 95 out of 100 for attack, but he's 30 out of 100 for defense. Didn't track back hard enough for Bobby Hill. There were some pretty bad turnovers and pretty poor decisions, kind of almost in an inside 50 capacity that just resulted in turnovers that he couldn't recover from. So that's one we're going to have to struggle through, or just deal with. And I know what I would do. I'm not going to say it again because it's a broken record at this stage. But yeah, it hurts to see that happen because you know that he puts in so much effort.
Yeah. And on the flip side, Collingwood's halfbacks, Quainer, Maynard, Nick Dacos, and John Noble all had really good games. Maynard did a great job on Charlie Cameron. Their attack off halfback, especially from Noble, was really good. And it's just it's staring you right in the face, that stuff that we're lacking at the moment. And then you got Mychek on the other end, clunking grabs. And, Charlie Cameron's had 4 shots on goal for 1 goal, 3. Jamie Elliot's had 4 shots on goal for 4 goals, nothing. So It's just that and the pressure, the tackle numbers. I mean, I mentioned it on our Twitter account, like plus 30 for Collingwood by the end of the game is just it's just simply not good enough. And yeah, they've come out and said it was a real focus for them across the week, and I guess across over the first 3 weeks where they've just been hammered from pillar to post in the media for the premiership hangover and all that sort of stuff. So they really turned their attention to it, and it showed. It showed for them, and we just didn't have the answers.
Yeah, it was a different level of intensity, but I still think we should have won the game.
I mean, and Fake says so in his press conference. He said it every other week. It's like, the stat sheet, there's a lot of green. There's a lot of, we've won the inside 50s every single week, but we just, it's bouncing out of there so easily at the moment. And, whether that comes down to we've been up for so long and other teams have had a good look at Brisbane and the way they play and how to counteract that, and now it's figured out, and now everyone's onto it. And so it's a pretty simple game plan. Get it in long and rely on our list, our elite talent in the forward half of, two talls that, they're not exactly setting the world on fire. Never have been, the best key forward duo in the AFL. But the small to mediums around them, McCarthy, Charlie Cameron, Zorko, Bailey, Rayner, has made up for that. And we hit the scoreboard more often than not. Our efficiency inside 50 has always been something we can hang our hat on. And it's just, that's gone right now. It's so far gone.
Yeah, there's an element of a disconnect, but at the same time, in that first half and throughout the game, if they're taking marks, they're going to be hitting the scoreboard.
Yeah.
There's a kind of like a weird element where like looking at other avenues through to scoring, it's like Link McCarthy's been almost like our most sure thing this season. Rayner more so as well this game, although he wasn't directly targeted as much and spent a fair bit of time in the midfield. But like something's gone weird with Cameron, and if I joked, I said, anyone can put strapping on their knee and look subpar, but if he's carrying an injury like that, try something different.
Yeah, well, I mean, after that Freo game we spoke about, he was spotted at the airport with a bit of a limp. He comes out on Thursday night with a fair amount of strapping around that leg, and he's just missing goals that he doesn't miss.
Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect opportunity where, like, there are a group of players, and if you're going to say to someone like Jack Payne, where he arguably had a poor quarter against Carlton, you're dropped.
Yep.
Why is Charlie Cameron not dropped on form?
Yep.
If you're going to use that as a thing. Like I had been very critical of Kai Lohmann last week, but I thought he showed far more than Charlie Cameron in like the 15 fucking minutes he was on the field.
And he
Kicked
went
a
and
nice goal.
And he backed it up the next day in the twos. So
yeah.
I'm
so
happy.
I hold my hand up about Kai Lohmann and say that he had a lot more impact as a sub. I know he only had 2 disposals or 3 disposals or whatever, but like it's I spoke to my brother as well who'd seen Kai play on the field, and he sort of said like his spread and his pressure and stuff like that, and like perception is a little bit different. So I hold my hand up and say I feel like I might have got that wrong, but it could have been the perfect game to put him in from the beginning. Because I don't think Charlie Cameron really offered too much. Although is occupying Braden Maynard a good thing? Possibly. Who knows? It's just, I don't like double standards. And, people will also say, oh, well, what about Jared Berry or whatever? But it's like...
I wouldn't be surprised if Kai gets a full game next week against North. And as we'll talk about the twos later, but he had a great game in the twos. Kicked 4 goals, got a fair amount of the ball, pressure was up, 17 disposals, 4 goals, 7 tackles. Like,
yeah,
that's what
you can't ask for more.
Yeah.
As a high half forward. Did Dev Rob play in the twos? Because I'm not sure whether he went off injured as a sub.
No, I think he just went off. I don't believe he played the next day. No,
because he was a little bit ineffectual, but I still would rather him in the team than JL.
Well,
yeah.
Look,
it's.
There's so many things. There's just way too many questions at the moment with everything going on with our footy club at the moment. It's hard to know like which question to address first in terms purely.
Let's talk about a question that is nothing to do with our club.
Yeah, righto.
I did watch North Melbourne and Carlton, and Carlton's highest meters gained player was 50-meter penalty.
Yes.
So, I have a problem with the umpiring, which is something that I occasionally do, but I kind of bring it up within context of itself. Second half was 6 free kicks to 16. We were tied at halftime, 14 all, and it ballooned out to 20 to 30. Of those 6 free kicks, one of them was the Pendlebury. They called it a slap, and he got a fine. But, you know, if I ask someone, hey, would you rather me punch you in the face, or would you rather me like open hand palm strike you in the face? I don't think too many people would be letting me do either of them.
No.
So I don't think that is a slap. I think that is the same as a punch, and it's not by technicality because it's not a closed fist. Cool. 2 of our free kicks were downfields that were not paid.
Yeah, that
One of them that resulted in a goal that was pulled back.
That's the thing that got me the most. It's not necessarily, and there were a few umpiring decisions that were pretty suspect in terms of what was and what wasn't paid. But the weird ones for me were there were at least 2 that should have been downfield that got called back for whatever reason. Gives Collingwood the chance to set up, and then there you go. That's annoying.
One was a push in the back on Noah Answorth, which we've seen every time as a downfield free kick. Jared Berry getting his head ripped off, kicking the ball inside 50 and it falling to Fletcher running in on an open goal square. Like, that's a goal.
Yep.
And then not to mention the fact that I'm still absolutely adamant, and I turned off Channel 7 commentary before quarter time and lined up my old mate Jared Waitley and Dermot Brereton was fun to listen to, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
They were both absolutely could not believe that was given a mark to Myercheck. Myercheck throws the ball back to the goal umpire when he gets up. He was not assuming anything, but that was given a mark, and Myercheck was not missing from that pocket. So and I understand the game is not supposed to be umpired so that it is equal number of free kicks or whatever. Like, that's not the way that the game works. It should generally be the team that has, funnily enough, more possession should wind up with more free kicks by the nature of how things work. I know Collingwood obviously had quite a high tackle game, but the idea that we had 3 free kicks for that weren't detrimental to us is just insane. They were given license to just drag the ball in, to sit on the ball. Like the one that Jared Berry gave away on the wing, where he ran to grab a ground ball, picked it up and was immediately tackled by 2 people, and it was holding the ball. And then you've got Mason Cox sitting on the ball, Dacos dragging it back in, other Dacos dragging. It's like any time we were trying to build any sort of momentum, it was just not. It felt like it was just like a rug pulled out from under you.
Yeah.
And when things aren't going well, geez, they are not going well. And then they continued not going well.
Yeah, and look, I hate umpire bashing, but it does, as you said, when things aren't going well, they're not going well, and that includes the rub of the green, and it just sort of, you get those games. You do get those games. It's salt in the wound. It adds insult to injury when you're already just looking for absolutely anything to get you a little bit of momentum, and then anytime you get something, it just gets taken away, and it's just so deflating. So,
well, when you're looking at it being a three and a bit goal lead, and 2 of the goals are accounted for, you're like, that's great. Also throw in the Darcy Cameron one where he missed his shoe by half a metre, which is exactly the same as the 4. That's your 3 goals there. And I know it doesn't work that way, and we're not going to go back in time, but it's frustrating when you can just see level of accountability. But what can you do? Nothing.
Now, obviously, there's always a lot of chat about this particular gentleman, and right now it's at fever pitch because of his performance on Thursday night, and probably his first 3 games. Actually, no, Freo it was pretty alright. Eric Hipwood had a night to forget. Logan Morris has put through 7 goals in the last 2 weeks and presented well, moved well, done well. But when you're talking about double standards, Eric generally falls into that category of Fagan's favourites or the undroppables, like a Jared Berry, whereas Jack Payne drops straight away. So, would you entertain it? Would you entertain dropping Eric or Darcy Ford?
Yeah, of course.
Probably Darcy Ford, but yeah.
No, absolutely. I don't. Well, I mean, I don't think there would be a necessity to have 2 rucks against North Melbourne.
Well, especially with Callum Coleman-Jones, who's gone now. So.
Oh man, that was horrible.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about that yet. But yeah, is it Sherry?
Yep.
Cherry, their ruckman. He's
good.
Fine.
Yeah.
Probably dealt with old mate De Koning better than Big O did. But, you know, they're one ruck. Larky does some pinch hitting, but that obviously leaves them short up top. But, like, you know, yeah, like if Hipwood went out, if Hipwood and Fort went out and, you know, a bit of fresh blood, maybe playing a one with a Mozzie squad, like that could be kind of cool. I'm up for anything at this point in time because, like, whilst, I mean, we'll get to other things. I think there could be other elements that include some ins and outs potentially, but like, I don't think that any player should be sacrosanct.
Yeah, well, no, of course not.
Like, you know, like I could see, I would be totally, if you were to say, oh, you know, Fort stays in, Hipwood goes out and Cameron goes out and they put in Kyle Lemon from the start and they put in Logan Morris. Cool. Like, it's a good time to do it. And I'm not saying that I'm taking North Melbourne lightly because I think they've got certain upside. Other elements, they're dreadful.
Yeah.
But they've got elements that could actually match up quite well against us, which is a little bit terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, by all means do it. I don't think anyone should be undroppable. And I really hope that I kind of haven't given off the approach that anyone or that people aren't droppable. I think that there's just kind of mitigating circumstances for some. I think the thing that you can fall into with key forwards, and I include Cameron as a key forward because he really is one of our key forwards. He might not be a tall forward, but Hipwood's the de facto third for all intents and purposes. He's the third that we go to in terms of numbers. And it was interesting to hear, particularly at the beginning of the season, when people were talking about Ollie Henry. He's for Geelong.
Yep.
Like him kicking 40 goals last year and them saying that's like a really good for a third option. And it's like Hipwood kicked 41 goals as our third option, essentially. You know, Danaher kicked in the 60s.
Yeah, 50s or 60s, and Cameron
and
50s
Chuck
as well.
The same. So it's like, it's pretty. Last season was a pretty good output by the three of them collectively. Because if you were going to say that, like, you know, Ollie Henry was going to kick 40 goals and it's going to be third behind Jeremy Cameron and
Hawkins.
big fella Hawkins, like, you're laughing. No one's got any complaints about Jeremy Cameron and Hawkins. So it's kind of like, it's skewed, you know, like if Hipwood and Danaher kicked 60 each and Charlie Cameron kicked 40, it's like not everyone can kick 1 million goals. It's not possible. Like it doesn't work that way. And I think last year Hipwood's assist numbers were the highest out of any key forward. So it's like, you know, I think last year was pretty well as good an output as we would be likely to get from the three of them. And I know I said it would be nice to see an extra 5% from Hipwood. Might not be possible.
No.
Yeah, I don't know that the idea of like, oh, you know, give him a run in the twos and that sort of thing. He can go at AFL level. And I think the thing is that you're always, with players like Danaher and Cameron and him, you're always on the cusp of breaking a game.
Well,
and we've seen it happen with all three of them.
Yeah, and they're coming up against a really poor back six at the moment. Like, North's key defenders on the week just gone had played like 4 and 7 games respectively or something like that. So they're coming up against I'm not going to say easy kills because, as you said, North, especially their midfield and their forward line are quite potent, quite dangerous, and they're keeping them in games for at least a half of footy. But their back six is where they really fall down. So it is an opportunity for both Eric and Joe to find a little bit of confidence in their game moving forward. And look, if that's what it takes is to beat up on a depleted back six, then I'll take it. I think it was this game last year that we had 40-odd scoring shots, and Charlie...
It was the one where we broke the record for marks inside 50.
And you know what? We are absolutely crying out for another one of those.
Crying out for hot cross buns with Brooksy. Not getting it this year, but... yeah, and I think that, you know, there's definitely people that aren't performing, but it's a hard thing to say, you know, whether or not they would actually kind of like, it would be better for the team. Like, everyone can't always perform and there's always going to be people down and whatever, but, you know, do what you can. But I think I could see him coming out of the team. I don't think he will, though.
I don't think he will either. If I was going to make a change, it'd be Ford out, Logan Morris in. You know,
That's literally what I just wrote down.
And I think that most people would be happy to see that, because if this third tall forward is something that Fags is going to persist with, then give it to the kid that's proving himself at VFL level. Yeah, it's 2 weeks. It's a small sample size, plus some intra-clubs, but the output is there. You can see it.
Well, the potential as well. The potential is there, and also the idea that, like, if the game dictates two and a half tall forwards, it's like this could be the thing to unlock whether Rayner plays through the middle or not, or whether Bailey spends more time in the middle, or to kind of give that level of pressure, and also just to blood some young. Like, I think it's a weird thing, and like this is probably the first season where we haven't had like a big signing in quite a while. I think there might have been 2021 where we didn't bring someone in that was no, that might have been Joe.
Yeah.
2022. So 22, I don't think we brought anyone in. And there's an element of stagnation in terms of feeling similar to that season, I feel. But
well, I mean, it was.
I guess there is. Sorry, go on.
It was Duday. Like Duday was the signing,
Yeah.
and now we know that that's just not going to be. It's not going to be likely this year.
Yeah.
It's a partial tear.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah. So,
I think a partial tear is the better option than a full
it's
re-tear,
particularly
particularly the same one.
I looked into it. It's a 3-month recovery, so you're looking at 12 weeks. So best case scenario, you might see him towards finals, but it's the same knee he's done. So like, write it off. And I'm sort of half in the camp of write the year off, lower our expectations, or at least readjust them, start again next year, make this our down year like Sydney had. Like Geelong had, like Richmond had before they all went on runs. And, we'll come back next year with 2 Ashcrofts, a Duday, a Coleman, and whoever else we get in the draft. And maybe who else knows what happens in the off-season. And maybe 2025 is our year. And I know there's still 20 games of footy to be played. So let's, I'm doing what Fake said not to do and catastrophizing. But I'm sort of half in that camp at the moment, as I'm sure a lot of Lions supporters are, just scratching our heads.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say before was just it's important not to forget that we did have Fletcher, Wilmot essentially, and Ashcroft all come in and be new contributors as well as Dunkley last year. So the element of, let's talk about my favourite fella, Knobwit Hardwick, with all his Christmas toys or whatever.
Yeah.
We kind of had that, and we were a bit spoiled for choice last year. So I think it's worth remembering that there are kind of newer players within the team that are still being blooded and still getting better. Let's do some votes and then we'll move on to something different.
All right, some votes for hoponbrewerytours.com.au. Book yourself a half or a full day tour right now at hoponbrewerytours.com.au. As I will do for your sake, I will give you the podcast votes and then I will give my real world votes. So for the podcast, I'll go Lockie, McCluggage, and Cam Rayner. In the real world, I will go Lockie, Beau McCreary, and Jamie Elliott.
Yeah. Fuck, I hate Beau McCreary, eh?
Had a great game. I mean, I say he had a great game. He had 10 touches, but covered the ground well. He was everywhere, and it was a great 10 touches. Hit the scoreboard. He's having a good year. And Jamie Elliott did his bit.
Yeah. Did you like the element where, because we talked last week about how like him and Link McCarthy were basically like opposite mirrors of one another?
Yeah.
And they literally went like set shot. Unfortunately, Elliott hit his snap and Link didn't. Anyway, I've gone Neil 3, Cluggage 2, and Berry 1.
Yep, fair call. So I thought Hugh had a really good game. His ball movement was good. He top meters gained. He hit the scoreboard as well. Great performance from Hugh. And that assist he got from Chuck, the cheeky little handball, that was pretty nice to watch. A few more of those would be all right. And even
also worth mentioning, Big O took a mark.
He did. I did see that, and I spoke to Andy and Deb, who I sit next to. Shout out to Andy and Deb if for some reason you're listening. I said, that's his first mark since the prelim last year, and they said, yeah. It's like, good, huh?
And he had some liquid hands for an assist to Zach Bailey. So
yeah, the old over the top no look handball, brilliant.
It's what you want from your ruckman, isn't it?
No, it's not. But if it works, whatever. Well, those are our votes for hoponbrewerytours.com.au. We have just a couple of questions. These questions thanks to Crisp Communications, where you can get yourself a free Brisbane Lions Fancast sticker at our website, or check out their website, crispcoms.co. So let's get into those. Both of these come from Twitter. Miller Time, who's a big fan of the show. Please tell me when we were going to win so I don't have to watch any more losses. Cheers.
No, because then I would also avoid disappointment.
Yeah. I mean, I have been confident the first 3 weeks. I've tipped Brisbane each and every week. And I don't always tip Brisbane. I'm not that sort of guy. I'm more of a
You're not
head
me.
over heart. Yeah, but I mean, we've got to beat North, hey? Like, if we don't,
It's
then
pretty much a must. Like, I said it when we were on the main event. I said I don't do predictions, but I would tip the Brisbane team tip the Brisbane team. What am I, Kelly Underwood? The Brisbane team. I would tip the Lions every week if I did tipping, which I don't. So, because it's too much insanity. So yeah, I would tip the Lions every week. Don't do predictions. Yeah, like, are there any questions about the season at large? Because you kind of just lost your shit there a little bit before about like throw the season out. I want to go back to that.
Well, I mean, if you want a completely reactionary and over-the-top question, then I've got one for you, thanks to Tom McElroy on Twitter.
I have been on the Reddit since that game.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty. And look, I don't want to give this too much time because I fundamentally disagree with the question altogether, but I do know that it is representative of a lot of Brisbane supporters at the moment. So, Tom says, who should take over as coach when Fagan rightfully gets the arse in the next week or two?
Well, no one, because there's no one really there.
Well, I mean, yes, no one, but also I don't think Fagan is going to get the sack anytime soon.
That's what I mean, but like, okay, so you're looking at it going, okay, who are we going to bring in? Nathan Buckley? Would people love that? Probably not. I don't have a problem with it.
I'd like it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, but who are the viable options other than dudes that have been sacked recently?
Yeah.
You're going to bring in, Andrew McWalters and hope that he has a great time.
Maybe. Stewie Jew?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Maybe. I don't want Stewie Jew. Like, the Gabba already needs enough renovations. Him stomping around, like, it's not going to happen. So no, but I think we said and alluded to it, the first couple of episodes this year that Chris Scott would be the one.
Yeah, and that's not happening anytime soon either. So
No.
I understand that it is sort of like one of the default positions to jump on is sack the coach when things aren't going well, but I also think that's amazingly short-sighted considering, and it is, as we've mentioned, very easy to forget where we've been and where Fags has brought us to. Also worth mentioning that in the 2 days leading up to that game, Fags was down in Melbourne at a human rights hearing as well. So he didn't exactly have hands on the team, and that's not an excuse.
No, but I also think it was telling that he was back on the boundary, and like, that I don't like that. And my partner made a really good point. She said the fact that he's there is indicative that they're not doing the right things. They're not doing the things that he wants them to be doing.
Correct.
And then interestingly, my brother said like he doesn't really see the point of him being down there because he doesn't really engage with the players. So it is a bit of a like, what is the point? But if you're going to do it properly. And I don't think he did it properly. So I'd stay up in the box, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it was maybe it was a case of he hadn't had time with the group during the week because he was down in Melbourne doing other stuff, and he wanted
good shout.
That FaceTime with the players in real time. Or maybe it was a shit, we're 0-3, I need to try something different here. Let's get back down on the bench and see if that makes any sort of difference. But in the end it didn't. So yeah.
So the season on the whole, like I'm definitely not in the camp of like throw the season away and build for next year or whatever, because I just think that like there's a unique potential here. I think with both Sydney clubs being quite good, that if the two Sydney clubs finish 1 and 2, that kind of eliminates a great element of the fear that we've had previously in terms of not finishing top 2. Of having to come to the MCG and try and do the job against big Victorian clubs down here. I'm not saying going to Sydney is going to be an easy thing to do, but if you can scrap a top 4 position, I think that there's going to be a little bit more. I think there'll be more losses generally amongst the competition because the competition is scary, man. Like, I know we just had the Bulldogs destroy West Coast, but I mean, that was kind of always going to happen. We've seen as a young team that they're going to have some decent performances and hold on, but not going to happen too much. But I think the competition is, again, going to be really tight. And the difference between sort of a few wins could be like finishing 8th and finishing 3rd. So got to kind of try and make the best of what you can.
I understand that. I don't think we should even be thinking about top 4 at the moment, though.
No, of course not. But, I mean, you're trying to win games.
Yeah.
And winning games, but I just think that the allowance of, I could see a team. Yeah, we've got more games. There's more rounds of football, so I think the idea of dropping 7 or 8 games and still finishing in the top 4 is actually viable this season.
Maybe.
It could be. I might completely, Geelong and GWS and Fremantle and Sydney might lock out the top four, having lost 2 games all year, each of them. But who knows? I just think I have a feeling about it. So
And there's definitely, I said before, I've got one foot in the camp of write it off. I've definitely got another foot in the camp of, yeah, we can definitely turn this around and salvage it. Top four seems, I mean, we're playing catch up. Top four is a long way off, and we're going to have, like, a lot of things are going to have to go right for that to happen. 5 to 8, definitely not unachievable.
Well, I'll put you this way. Like, we're technically speaking only 1 game worse off than we were this time last year.
Yep.
And we finished in the top 2. So is it unthinkable? And we also were like, we're not playing well. We're not doing the right things. So, it does seem a little bit weird. Like, is 1 game at this stage of the season really the difference between the top 2 finish and the top 4 finish? Maybe, maybe not. Is it the vibe around the club? Probably. But it was pretty shit this time last year.
Yeah. There's just a lot of players that are going to have to pull their finger out. And a lot of things are going to have to go right, as I said. And I don't know. It's just, it feels so far off at the moment. And like I've said before, maybe that's just due to the enormous expectations we've come into this season with, and probably why the losses feel so much worse, because everyone came in with so much hope, and that each week that hope just gets squashed a little bit more, and then, all these off-season stories that have been floating around for a few months finally rear their head in the, wider public, and then that squashes it a little bit more, but then, wins sort of paper over the cracks more than anything. So what we need to do is start winning games of footy.
And we've seen with, potential controversies with Melbourne and with Sydney Swans, it's kind of like, you said it, it's like winning detracts from a lot of those things. We said in the off-season it was one of the quieter off-seasons.
Yep.
Turns out not really.
Yeah. Turns out it was not. So, I mean, we'd be remiss not to talk about the elephant in the room that is the Brisbane Lions US trip, the off-season. Obviously, there's no point going into it too deep or naming names, because it's pretty irresponsible when there's families and relationships. And at this stage, it's still, I guess, a fair level of hearsay and conjecture at this point. But we got to talk about it.
I think there's an element of trying to kind of like, there's a lot of misinformation going on in a general sense.
Yep.
So to kind of like, it wasn't just the Lions or just 10 blokes that decided to have a boys trip. It was quite a large, scheduled event between multiple clubs.
Yep. Yeah,
and it was a golfing trip. It's also been misinformed that it was in Las Vegas, where it was actually in Nashville, Tennessee, which from information I've received is not much better in terms of optics. But, it'd be kind of like going to Atlantis. Atlantis? Is that the underwater sea place?
It is, yeah.
So I'm thinking of Atlantic City.
Yes.
So not Atlantis. If they went to Atlantis, that would be amazing. Because it would solve a lot of issues, and I myself as a historian would kind of like might want to chat about that. So the rumors themselves, I'm struggling with this a little bit because it sickens me massively.
Yep.
If any of this stuff is correct, and I would find it very difficult to support individuals and players that are affiliated with this kind of a thing. I'm firmly not in the camp of like footballers doing football things, because I think that normalizes this kind of behavior, and it's the sort of thing that would drop down in a social context to other people and young men.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily specific to footballers, like humans. Like, people do shit things all the time. Good people do bad things. Relationships aren't simple. A lot of them are quite complex, and a lot of things happen to everyday people all the time. So I don't think just lumping it into footballers doing, footballer things is, I think it's just an easy way to describe a fairly complex situation.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's a way of normalizing it, with people sort of saying like, hey, they play football and they do it well. And I mean, they're not doing it very well at the moment.
Yes.
But I'm not in that camp. I just don't think that the one hand doesn't wash the other in this kind of a way. And I think if you're representing this club, you represent the values of the club when you're not there. Like, I've just started a new job, and I had to do HR and procedures stuff that said that even when I'm not at work, I'm representing the company I work for. So if I was to knob off like that, it's the sort of thing that can come back to you. And like, they're getting paid a lot of money to do that. It's like, pull your fucking heads in.
Look,
I don't know. I don't really know what to say because there is an element of like what we don't really know.
no. And
But it's not good.
no.
Whatever it is, it's not good.
And by the time that it gets to people like you and me, it's been through however many people who've added a little bit of mayo to the story or a little bit of flair. As you said, there were heaps of players on that trip from, Hawthorn. There was a Fremantle fella there, ex-Geelong players. Like, it was a big trip. It was a big golfing trip, largely comprised of Brisbane Lions players. And it was all sort of organised by sort of this power couple in Brisbane that are fairly heavily invested in the Brisbane Lions club. So, yeah, I mean, you get enough people overseas in a certain mood, then it's not going to go swimmingly. Like, DeGoey in New York a couple of years ago, what came of that? There was a legal proceedings in place until Eddie Maguire flew over to New York City to check in on Jordan DeGoey, may have taken his checkbook, and then suddenly those charges were dropped. So, who knows about that? It's obviously not a great look, and maybe it is a reason why the team is not performing or gelling if there is fractions amongst the group. Obviously, all those have been vehemently denied from Danny Daly, Greg Swan, the players themselves, but maybe there still is some leftover scars there. So yeah, it's one of those things that it obviously looks bad, and it looks really bad when your team's not winning games of footy. And it also makes it low-hanging fruit and easy to just like punch down at the same time. I have a feeling that in 2-3 weeks' time it's going to be a bit of a non-event, but I'd hate to think that it is really tearing the group apart who's worked so hard to form a really strong culture and get within a kick of a premiership for it all to be undone by a few bad eggs doing shit things.
Yeah, I think there's an element where, like, I was very critical of Damien Hardwick all the time, but specifically when he had been unfaithful to his wife in the COVID times. And the reason for that was specifically, and at the time, I had a few friends that were Richmond fans, and they didn't understand because they sort of were just like, oh, whatever, it happens. It's like, no, the issue is that you've, like, cultivated and masqueraded and created this like illusion that your club at the time, Richmond, was like this very like wholesome family type thing where all through the premiership years prior to, there were the families in the rooms, and it was all family, and then like the from the top down it's like poisoned, so it completely like shatters that illusion. And I think it's almost worse than if you're like, let's say like the North Melbourne team of the 90s, where they were like hard pub, not very nice people, and everyone knew it. So when they did, it was kind of like, oh, well, they're just doing what they kind of do. And that might be me normalizing this. But I think with something like this, where we have worked, so hard on players being fostered by like, older people in the group, and like this whole sense of club culture, and we had gotten rid of stuff that had happened. Like, there is an element where like, when this similar-ish thing happened with Dane Zorko, prior to, I think it was 2019.
Can't really remember. Yeah, it was a few years ago. It would have been at least 5 years ago, you'd have to say, yeah.
Yeah, it was the sort of thing where I was very vehement that he should have been stripped of the captaincy. And if that's the kind of leadership that you're allowing to stay in place, it's kind of a bit no wonder something like this has happened.
Yeah.
Because if that's sort of a senior player, and if there are other senior players that are involved, it's kind of, we've spoken a lot over the last couple of years about our younger players now going into leadership roles and how important that is for their careers and stepping forward. And it's like, it just feels so kind of gross. It's a hard thing. I'm a little bit lost for words, and I feel like it's almost just the ability to separate like the art from the artist is just a bit too soon. I know I've had a lot to say, but yeah, it's I feel like a disappointed parent.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of that, and like I said, it is just magnified by the fact that we're losing games of footy as well. I mean, it's all like when everything, as you said, when everything's going wrong. Everything's going wrong. And it just feels like everything's going wrong at the moment for a team that came in as premiership favourites. It's all just sort of started crumbling bit by bit on field, off field. Who knows what's next? I mean, Lockie went in for ankle scans, so that's the last thing you need as well, is your best player potentially off, and then your mate JL coming back into the team. It's all fine in the end, inevitably, but yeah. I don't know, mate.
One thing I've realised that's kind of funny. This is completely off topic.
Sure.
But you've got a big number 20 in behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson Pryor wears number 20.
He does.
I think I might have to get myself a Jackson Pryor Guernsey. Just purely because, and then try and claim that he's like the best number 20 that ever played for the
You couldn't in all good conscience do that. You wouldn't believe it for a second. When we all know Cedric Cox has been the best number 20.
He did kick a good goal.
He did.
Against Carlton at the Gabba.
He did. And that was about the only thing he ever did.
That was a horrific night for me. That was the one where I had to sit in between my brother and his partner.
Oh, lovely. You're the mediator.
Okay.
Look, let's have a look at the VFL, which was a very scary finish to a game. A great finish to a game, though, by the way. Out of Brighton Homes Arena, Brisbane VFL taking on Collingwood VFL. Went into the last quarter with a fairly all-right lead. We're up by 24 points. Kicked the first goal, so got us out to a 5-goal lead early in the last quarter before Collingwood kicks the next 5 goals in a row, and a lot of them from Joe Richards, who ended up with 6.
Who the hell is Joe Richards?
That's my question. He's kicked 6 goals. Anyway, we've walked away with a 2-point win. So lucky to get away with it. But Kai Lohman, as I said before, 4 goals, 7 tackles, 17 touches, hits the scoreboard. Logan Morris with another 3 goals, 9 marks, which is a very handy stat to have at this day and age. Kyle Dunkley had a great game. Jimmy Tunstall, another solid performance, 25 touches, 8 clearances, 5 tackles. You know, those are all good numbers. Jackson Pryor, another one as well, 21. Jimmy Madden, serviceable. Bruce Revel, I'm going to be watching him very, very closely this year because I think he could be a very left field option to be making a debut at some point. Sharpie, another little solid game. Darcy Gardner, back playing decent footy back in the VFL. And Reece Torrent, another good one as well. So I wouldn't mind seeing Kai Lohman play a full game. As we get into our changes, I wouldn't mind seeing Kai play a full game just to get that under his belt. As I said before, I'd like to see Logan Morris come in for Darcy Fort, and especially as we touched on, if we're coming up against this back 6, which isn't exactly awe-inspiring, maybe the perfect game for not only Joe and Eric to get a bit of confidence, but to bring in a new kid like Logan Morris to give him a taste of AFL footy against a back 6 that isn't exactly. Well, I'm not going to say it's VFL quality.
Standards?
Yeah, well, it's close as to VFL quality as you're going to get. So the key defenders aren't going to have many more games under their belt than he is.
I just had a funny incident there where I can smell, and you said that the Bulldogs West Coast game was really like smoggy looking.
Yeah.
Something's going on. And I just messaged my partner and said, I can smell smoke, or is someone smoking? Like, is there cigarettes or something? She said, I can't smell anything. Are you having a stroke? It's too good. That's really good news about the VFL. I mean, obviously not great, giving up 5 goals in the last quarter, but, get away with the win.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'd be all in favour for doing a bit of rotation. Like, you don't have to play the same. Like, we talked at the beginning. It's like the squad is the important thing. Like, to expect people to play 26 games straight through is insane. Like, bit of rotation never hurt. Unless you're bringing in Jared Lyons, in which case it does. But he's played, so he can be rotated out.
I think I'm only making 2 changes, and that is... Maybe I'm only even making 1. And that's Logan Morris for Darcy Fort, and then Kai playing a full game and either rotating Dev as the sub, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm
finding, I'm struggling to put in. I want to put more people in than is possible.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a whole bunch of changes. You get Jackson Pryor in to play that halfback role, but you've got to take people out for him, and I just don't know. People on the fringe at the moment, Jasper Fletcher's had some quiet games. I wouldn't be surprised if Jack Payne goes back out and Darcy Gardner comes in and Jack Payne plays like 5 games straight in the VFL and finds some form before he's considered again. I mean, there's a bunch of changes.
Is it also the sort of thing where we're assuming, like, Zorko probably isn't good to play 5 games in a row?
Yeah.
Or 6 games in a row, Like, I mean, I've got here, I've got outs, and this is going to be a bit controversial, but I've got, like, Ford, Charlie Cameron, one of Cal or Fletch, and Zorko, and I've got Morris, Lohman for a full game, Sharp, Pryor, and Tunstall on the bench.
Wow.
Just, no, why not?
And I hear you. I completely hear. Why not? Indeed. I don't see that many changes happening in reality. But
I also wrote Tunstall with 2 L's and an E on the end. Tunstile.
you never know. I mean, he's put together a couple of good weeks. He's deserved a call up. Why not? He played both preseason matches, so he's obviously moved up the pecking order, and he might make way for Fletcher, who's been fairly quiet. Had a better game on the weekend, but he's been fairly quiet.
Yeah, and you can just, rotate one out every week, like an RDO. Why not?
I agree what you're saying with Zorko, but we also just had the bye recently, so that sort of that's his RDO to a degree. I don't see Charlie Cameron being dropped. I mean,
no, neither do I. But I think that meritocracy, it could happen. It's not going to, but I just think his output has been shit.
Yep. I hear you.
That's all I got to say about that.
He's hoping, especially for that forward 6, that it all sort of happens. Marks inside 50. 3 goals apiece from all of them.
18 goals.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Should we talk about drugs?
Sure. Don't do it. Well, do it. I'm not your dad. I assume we're talking about the drug policy AFL wide that has been exposed as hey doc, I've had a big night last night. I think I might still have some drugs in my system. Should we have a test? Yes. I got your drug test back, and it looks like you've got a sore hamstring. That one.
Hamstring awareness.
Yeah.
Yes. Obviously there's been I wouldn't call it a whistleblower. I don't like that term. But I would call him an ultimate backtracker now. But we had someone, provide a little bit of awareness and context, not hamstring awareness, about the various policies in terms of like the AFL, basically where you would go in and say, hey, like you own up to it.
Yeah.
Coaches don't know, team don't know, and then they just slap you with an obscure injury so that you miss out for the week. I find that to be utterly insane. And although, whilst I can understand an element of like trying to provide a guilt-free situation where players will like hopefully try and do the right thing without criticism, that works in theory. I don't think it really works in practice because I do think that there are issues with this within the competition, and I think there's elements and things that are missing. So a revised one of that could be good. I don't think any of the ideas that I would have are probably going to go through that in terms of like, I said this before off air. If you commit a crime and then you go to the police and you go, hey, I've committed a crime, they don't not charge you and say you've got a sore hamstring and like don't go to work.
I mean, largely depends on the crime.
Sorry?
It largely depends on the crime.
Well, let's say you assaulted someone or murdered someone, you're still going to jail.
Yes.
And I said before, doing drugs is a federal offense. It's a crime, technically. So the idea of it being like, okay, well, we'll just give you a week off. I find it amazing that the coaches don't know. It's baffling to me.
It is, once again, it falls into a certainly not a great look. There's definitely elements of the procedure that I agree with, like doctor-patient confidentiality I agree with, and them looking out for what's best for that person, obviously I agree with. It's the deception on a wider scale that is obviously pretty not the done thing. Having said that, we saw Willie Rioli, at the time, he missed 2 years for a bit of pot in his system, and obviously he went about that the wrong way. He tried to swap out a drug test and all sorts of weird stuff that went on. If he had just gone to his doctor the day before and said, actually, it's a... And I guess he's still missing a week of football. So there is an element of punishment. It's not 2 years worth of footy, and you're not getting publicly named and shamed, I guess, is the one, because we've seen what happened to Bailey Smith. We saw what happened to Willie Rioli. We see what's happened to Clayton Oliver. Is like everyone in the wider public who exactly, like, they're no saints. Like, I've done plenty of party drugs in my time. I'm just not an elite level footballer. So no one gives a shit if I do it. So they get absolutely hammered by the media and the public. And so you've got to consider mental health in that sort of, respect as well, to a degree. You can argue, yeah, you've done it to yourself, but, I mean, a little bit of drugs, the punishment doesn't necessarily fit the crime in just getting absolutely hammered by people that don't even know you for days, weeks, months. People getting in touch with you via social media, saying, things about you and your family that they've got no right to. Yeah, it's a tough one to balance. I get it. There's there's elements I agree with and elements that I don't.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts of that is don't get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to play football then. Work a normal job, which you would still get fired from if you were on drugs doing.
Yeah.
So I've got very little sympathy on a lot of the things you talk about. I think mental health, and as someone personally that struggled quite a lot with mental health over the past 5-10 years, possibly even more, I've got a pretty good grasp of who I am and what I am now, to be able to make things. I think it is used as a coverall massively because, have I behaved myself poorly in the past? Yeah, but I don't blame it on my mental health. I blame it on my decision making and stuff like that. It runs separate to that.
No, I understand that, but it's more like if you made a mistake and then suddenly everyone thinks they have a right to an opinion on it and then starts coming for you in a very public manner, not just you, your partner, your mum, your dad, your sister, whatever, because you've made a mistake, that they don't know you or the context around that mistake. That's what I mean by protecting mental health and not using it as an excuse.
Yeah.
It's that aspect.
I suppose it's just because we have seen it used as an excuse for multiple players. So, and I very much disagree with that. But yeah, I still think that the idea of no one's becoming a professional footballer because they don't want heaps of cash or to be known.
Yeah.
It comes with the territory. Honestly, if you wanted to be a footballer that had none of this happen, don't have social media. Problem solved there, I guess. I guess then you're looking at family members and whatever. But I think the level of status that they have, if it was a politician or someone, it would probably be the same. And that's a similar. There'd be people that would know far more footy players than politicians. So it's I've got very little sympathy for it, and I find with the previous kind of policy, the idea that they don't get named and shamed is fine. I don't think that they should be being named and shamed. But I do think that there should be elements of it's doctor confidentiality, but it's also talking about illegal things.
Yep.
So it's I feel like there should be people within a club that should know. The coach should know. And it seems really kind of it's a guise to try and help them out, but they're not actually doing anything to help them out. If someone is worried about failing a drug test and they have to go out with hamstring awareness for the weekend, get them to go to 4 weeks of drug counseling. Say, okay, well, if you're going to admit to this and you're gonna come forward, you have 4 weeks off. You go to counseling or whatever. This would be a better optic because you want to deter the behavior. 1 week off isn't deterring the behavior. It's saying you can have 1 week off and you won't risk having 2 years off.
Yeah,
it needs to be scaled differently.
Well, there is going to be a rejigging of the drugs policy, and I think that's due to take effect in June or something, from what Eddie Maguire was saying. So, look, I think there will be a serious overhaul, especially since this has all come to light. But yeah, I mean, obviously, and I'm trying to put my mind in the head of a 19, 20-year-old kid who's suddenly got shitloads of cash. a certain level of fame surrounded by people that are offering them drugs. And maybe that's from their own teammates. So I made some plenty of stupid decisions when I was 20. Suddenly you give me a wage of $300,000-$400,000 a year. Those mistakes would have been amped up because I got too much money to know what to do with. So,
Is there an element of like player managers aren't as big of a thing? Like, not every player would have a manager, right?
I would say 95% of them would.
Because was Simon Black not trying to kind of create basically like an awareness for younger people put in those positions in terms of athletes and stuff, being able to kind of set themselves up for the future and actually kind of like segmenting funds and money? Was that something that he was involved in, or am I like actually having that stroke I mentioned before?
I couldn't tell you.
Because I think that a level of education, particularly with younger players, is something that, like, if the clubs aren't doing, they need to be doing it, and they need to be kind of enforcing it, and not in the sense of an allowance for people because it's their money and they should be able to do what they do with their earnings. But it is a hell of a lot of money for people with not a hell of a lot of life experience and life skills.
I do know a lot of managers do set up like almost like a trust fund in that way. It's like, yeah, you're getting paid, but your money's sitting over here, and I'm going to give you X amount per week. So there is a few managers and a few players that do operate under that system. And whether it's because we don't trust you with the money or whether it is because, hey, you're 18 and you shouldn't have this money. But I have heard that it is a thing for certain amounts. But they're still getting...
It does sound kind of icky when you put it in that kind of a context of like, oh, we're withholding your money, because then it sort of seems like you're in some sort of weird Britney Spears paradox. But like, yeah, it's just... Do they... I don't know. Let's not get talking about the economics of football. It's too frustrating and weird. But I do think that with the pay packet comes with responsibility.
Yeah.
So
100%.
I mean, if you as an 18-year-old wanted to go to rehab or drug counseling, you probably wouldn't have been able to do it on that. And if you did, it would have been some public service in the middle of nowhere, probably like South Melton or something. And like, wouldn't have been great. But they can go to the best doctors, the best physios, the best mental health providers that they can pay for. So it's like they've got means to an out there. So I don't know. I just don't. There's the mental health normalization, and then there's the idea that, like, just because it is also rampant in larger society, that it is okay for the footballers as well. I don't like that, because I don't think that they operate necessarily the same. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Fair enough. Well, we've certainly covered a lot in the show today, and I dare say you haven't had the chance to think of a memorable game between Brisbane and North Melbourne.
Actually, I do.
Oh, yeah? All right, well... Go.
Yeah, it's funny. So I believe, I don't know the year, but I think it was 2003.
Okay.
Maybe 2002. It was a draw where Voss kicked a point at the end.
Ah, that's right.
And I remember that because we had this, like, kind of giant red-haired dude turn up at my primary school, and like mid-term, and like, I think for whatever reason, like, it was one of those classrooms, primary school. This is really going back memory lane. You're sort of in twos, and with my last name being so far down the alphabet, I was by myself, and I'd been by myself for the entirety of the year. I don't know how they're allowing that in like grade 5 or whatever, but this new kid comes in and he sits next to me, and he's like the only other person who is into footy, but he's a North Melbourne fan. And we watched that game together.
Cute.
And that's all I remember as, 11-year-olds or something like that. So I remember that one, not for really any other reason. The only other one I could probably think of was, I'm going to say 2000 and... Actually, that's a shit one to pick. Let's go. The first game I went to when I moved down to Victoria, which was 2019 at Marvel Stadium, where we won. And it was good. And Oscar McInerney took some large marks.
More of that, please. Well, I might take you back all the way to 1999 prelim final.
Oh, no. Your mate punched.
Yes. Yep. Obviously, Kangaroos walked away with a massive win after a huge last quarter.
Was it Mick Martin?
Mick Martin, punched Simon Black, broke his eye socket, and left him with, blurred vision for
Temporary blindness.
yeah, quite a while afterwards. But Blackie, being the solid gold bloke that he is, looked after him in the tribunal and made sure that Mick was all right to play in the grand final the following week, and has no regrets over it. So
He nearly stitched himself up though because he didn't realize that there was vision.
Yep.
Blackie. Like I don't know. I'm sure that we've both watched that open mic multiple times. But yeah, he does say he didn't realize that there was footage of it, so he probably wouldn't have said that he didn't know what had happened or something. But here we are. Mick Martin got to play.
walks away with the
And he also
premiership,
got
so
to
good on him.
punch a bloke in the face. So how good?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I that's a little bit before my time in terms of conscious awareness. Kind of funny. I said like 02 or 03, and you fucking raised me to 99.
Well, how's this for a score sheet at the end of that? Wayne Carey kicked 3, as did Shannon Grant, Brent Harvey, and Corey McKernan. Goal scorers for the Lions that day: Luke Power kicked 2, Clark Keating kicked 2, and Marcus Ashcroft ended up with 31 touches ahead of Nigel Lappin. So Simon Black was rendered useless for a good portion of that game.
Yeah.
Michael Voss did not play. Brett Voss got himself 15 touches, though.
Yikes.
Ben Robbins got himself 10 touches, and it probably wouldn't have been too long after that Ben Robbins actually went and joined the Kangaroos.
Yeah. Not the most fun, I guess, but there have probably been some other good. The other one I was going to mention, which is I think it was 2017. We lost by about 50 points, but we had one on the bench.
That's right.
It was like, I think it was like Mitch Robinson broke his foot, someone else got injured, and someone else. And we had one on the bench, but we won the second half.
Yep.
And I remember that being like yeah, nice one, guys. Like,
Is that the one
we
where
lost by 50 points?
Dane Beams got like 30 plus touches and kicked 4 or something as well?
Yeah, something like that. He was really good.
Yeah. What a time.
Horrible time. The other also one would be, man, there's so many classics. Daniel Rich's 200th,
Oh, yeah.
where I think Big O kicked a goal from a pretty soft push.
That's right.
That was like, oh my goodness, the AFL made a mistake and it should have been a free kick. But then it's like, Ben Brown won a free kick 2 minutes earlier, and it was equally as bullshit, but no articles about that.
That's right. That's right. And then, of course, we had the Rainer Cup at the end of 2016 as well.
Yeah, with some absolute sharpshooting early on in that game that went tremendously terrible. So, tremendously terrible.
Oh, good stuff, eh? Well, that'll do us, I reckon. Plenty still to be discussed, and a game against North Melbourne down in Adelaide at Norwood this time, so that's something to look forward to, not out at Mount Barker. Yeah.
Not Mount Arthur this year.
No, never was.
Norwood. I'm sure my dad ran around there at some point in time in his life. Just hope, again, I think I said it earlier on, no one scrambles their brains on that brick wall. So,
Well, he's hoping we get a bloody win. I mean, I don't care how it happens. Like, let's just do it, please.
bit worried about George Wardlaw, I tell you. I like him.
Yeah, I mean...
Also, how about that dude with the sideburns?
Oh, Eddie Ford. Love that.
Re the Fonz. You are not the Fonz. Yeah, there's a pretty good chat going on during that game because obviously my brother's wife, Carlton fan, so
Yep.
bit going on. Obviously the Achilles,
Yeah.
fun. Yeah, let's end this.
Okay.